to another episode of From the Barber's Chair. I am your host, Mr. Mason, with the message. Today we have a very, very important topic. Title of today's podcast is The Cost of Spilled Blood. The Cost of Spilled Blood. This is dealing with gang violence and senseless murders within our communities, abroad, and it's a very important topic, and I hope I can reach the hearts and minds of the people that are out there, and hopefully I can wake you up to some logic and some wisdom and good sense. So gang violence, let's deal with that first, and as we go on with this podcast for today, I want you to pay attention to the narratives and all the information that is posted during this podcast, because it's going to be very informative. So, gang violence, let me allow you to understand what gang violence is. For those who think it's just about street activity and being tough and, holding it down for your crown or whatever they say in the hood. Gang violence is very serious, and I'm going to give you a definitive meaning to it. Coming from the Oxford Dictionary, gangs are defined as an organized group of criminals. Okay, so reason why I want to bring that out first is because when you're dealing with the term gang, it's a title, it's a mark, it's a classification that is used by people who are in positions of authority, and it's not a term of endearment, even if some gangs call themselves looking out for the community. It's still not a term of endearment, because the powers that be, they classify you as people who are getting together to perform criminal activity. Okay, now let me give you a little history on gangs. For those who just willy-nilly and just woke up one day and decided they wanted to be a part of a gang, they wanted to represent a flag and a color. Let me just give you a little information on where this started from, because we deal with spirituality, and spirituality deals with a term called etymology. And etymology deals with the origin of words and the origin of where things begin. So when we're dealing with gangs, we have to understand that gangs began to arise back in the 19th century and has been a problem ever since. Okay, I want you to hear that clearly. Gangs arose in the 19th century and has been a problem ever since. Now there's a quote or a cliche that's often used. It says you're either a part of the solution or you are a part of the problem. So when we're dealing with gangs, it's letting us know that it has been a problem ever since the 19th century. Now let me tell you a little bit about the first gang that ever arose on U.S. soil. Back in the 1820s, the first gang appeared on the scene in the city of New York, and they migrated from New York to Washington, D.C., and the gang was known as the 40 Thieves. The 40 Thieves. The 40 Thieves wasn't a black gang. It wasn't of any kind of gang that we know today. This was allegedly an Irish gang. Okay, and they had strong affiliations, and a lot of their affiliations dealt with corrupt politicians. So, when we dealing with gang violence and the spilling of blood and all this senseless killings that's happening out here. We have to understand that, when we going back to the origin of a gang, these were people who were trying to establish themselves not towards another minority group, but towards a government who practiced oppression. And these gangs was able to even influence certain government officials, and as a result, they were able to impose their will or gain some kind of ground. Yet we have gangs today who are primarily focused on how they can tear down another minority group, or how they can claim a street that doesn't belong to anybody, or how much they represent a color more than the next person. And they will even get to the point where if you wear a certain color in a certain neighborhood, it becomes a problem. Now, the issue with that is, what if the person has family in that neighborhood and they're not gang affiliated, but the department stores and the malls, they sell whatever color you want. So I don't see any gangs running up into the stores telling them what color they better sell or anything like that, but they taking their aggression out on their own community, and even worse, their own people. So we want to deal with this topic today. You have to excuse my level of relaxation. I just ate. So if you bear with me, we're going to walk you through this, and I hope you become enlightened by the things that are going to be said today. So once again, the gang was known as the 40 Thieves. This is the first gang to grace U.S. soil, and they had strong affiliations, and their primary objective was to corrupt government officials, politicians. Okay? Like I said before, if you're trying to gain some ground and you're a minority, and you know that the head is practicing oppression, you have to go after the head to gain some kind of ground. So this is what they did. They were a little more strategic. They just wasn't out here just, I'm gonna kill somebody. You understand? So here's a question that I might propose to the people and the viewers out here today. Which one will you choose? Will you choose life, or will you choose genocide? Life or genocide? Which one will it be? Life or genocide? Which one will you choose? Because see, at this point in time, gang violence is at an all-time high. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, what community you live in, where you live at. It's gang violence everywhere on the face of this earth. But the question goes back to, which one do you choose? Life or genocide? Now, let me give you an understanding of what life and genocide is, because I know everybody that may be viewing, might not be as educated as the next person. It don't take the smartest brain to be a gang member, and this is not anything to discredit or demean anyone, but this is facts. This is the unadulterated truth. So we know it doesn't take the smartest person to be a gang member, but it does take a person with some sort of valor, and relentlessness, So let me give you an understanding of what life is. Life is the history of one's existence. from the time they were born to the time that they die. So life is a person, an animal, a thing, whatever. Life is one's existence from the time that they were born to the time that they die. Now let me give you a little statistics from an analytic report. And this is coming from a government website. And like I said, you can check the information that's being posted during this podcast. However, let me give you a little bit of information. The average age of people who are victimized by gang violence is between 12 to 25 years old. 12 to 25 years old. Now let me back up and tell you what life is. Life is the history of one's existence from the time that they were born until the time that they die. Now the average age of a person who is victimized by gang violence is between the age of 12 and 25. So that means you have only lived either 12 years or 25 years. Now that's something to look at, that's something to think about, and it's definitely something to meditate on. Because if life is your existence from the time that you were born until the time that you die, and what's more important than that is it's a recorded existence, which means there's a legacy involved. Now, if you only live 12 to 25 years, you have no legacy to leave behind because you have been cut short of your life. Now, let me tell you how this happens. Some drop out of school to get involved with gang activity or some sort of street violence or street activity. Some people will drop out of school. So some people might be out there asking like, how in the world does a 12-year-old get involved with gang violence? Well, this is how this happens. 12-year-olds become rebellious. They find somebody in the community who they look up to, and these people are part of some kind of gang affiliation, and the young people gravitate to them, and as a result of that, they become initiated and they grow up in the midst of gang activity. So this is not unusual. This is stuff that happens every day, and if you live in certain areas in this country, such as California, Chicago, Maryland and New York and all other kind of areas. It don't matter where you at. You could be in Ohio, you could be anywhere on the face of this map, and you'll find some kind of gang violence. I don't care if you go overseas, you can find some kind of gang violence going on. And most of these people, according to the analytic report, are recruited at a young age. So we ought to be checking our children and making sure everything is straight. You dig? So, we have learned so far that back in the 1800s, the first gang came on the scene in the United States, and they were known as the 40 Thieves. Okay? We know that they corrupted politicians in order to gain some ground. Now, these gangs today, it seems as though the majority of the population that they are corrupting are their own community and each other. So when we look at this and we ask what kind of ground are they gaining, the only ground they're gaining is the cemetery. They're increasing the revenue for people who own cemeteries and people who own funeral homes. They're increasing the revenue for these kind of people because that's the only ground they're gaining. They're not better in their communities. They're not making sure their little brothers and little sisters grow up to be productive. They have little to no accountability, because we know the first rule of leadership is accountability. So when it comes to being a leader, that's out the window. But what we do know is they are advocating early death and gang violence. So we also learn, I'm going to say this again, that life is the existence of a person from the time that they were born until the time that they die. Now, I don't know about you, but when you are born, I believe that every spirit living is pro-life. So from the time of toddler to adolescence, you are doing everything in your power to experience life. Somewhere along the line, you just felt like, I'm gonna die today. Not because you're sick, maybe sick in the head, but not because you're sick physically, but because you saw an advertisement of street activity and gang violence, and you decided that you wanted to be tough and prove 0 points to nobody, all the way to the cost of your life. So I asked the question before I got into this segment, which one do you choose, life or genocide? Now, let me help you out with something else. People who died at the age of 12 or anywhere in between 12 and 25 years old, they don't have much of a history or an existence. So what kind of price, and let this question resonate within you, what kind of price has someone chose to place as a value on these young people's lives, where they have become fascinated with becoming murdered? How much money did they offer you for you to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to get myself murdered sooner or later? Now, I don't want this to be confused with 50 Cent's cliche, I'm going to get rich or die trying. That's about giving it your all to try to make some money. But I'm talking about, what kind of money do I have to offer a person for them to portray a role where they are advocating getting their brains blown out at an early age? How much money is that? Because if it's $1 million, 10 million, $1 billion, there's no U-Hauls or Brinks trucks driving behind no hearses. So, what kind of money has people offered you to place this kind of value on your life? Which one will you choose? Life or genocide? Life or genocide? Now let me help you understand what genocide is. Genocide is the destruction of a nation the destruction of a nation. Genocide is when you taking out your own people. You're eradicating your very own existence from the face of not only this earth, but from the face of history. You know, because people who write the books and dictate the literature can erase you from history. This is a proven fact. So you contribute to that when you choose genocide over life. And there's many ways to choose genocide, but I'm not going to get into that. That's another topic for another day. Hopefully you choose life. Now, I'm going to say this because this is something that has really been getting under my skin lately. Let me say this real loud and clear, and I want you to hear me clearly. This is Mr. Mason with the message. Real gangsters move in silence. Let me say that again. Real gangsters move in silence. Now, I'm not trying to give you no tips, and I'm not trying to advocate being a gangster. But those who believe that they are gangsters, that are operating with a big mouth, you're fooling yourselves. You are making yourself a walking target. Real gangsters move in silence. It's a rule of the streets. It's the number one rule of gang life and mafia activity. Keep your mouth shut. So, the thing that ripples my skin the most is when I see my young people, the youth who I try to advocate for and wake up to a sense of consciousness and bring them out of that hole that leads to eternal damnation and early death. The thing that ripples my skin the most is social media and all these other social platforms that these people use to glorify their ignorance. I mean, they're on there and out of their mouth they're saying, I'm the toughest, I got the most guns, I got a lot of money, I got all of my people around me, we're representing this, we bout that, I'm over here, come see me. When in reality, the message that is being portrayed to the viewer is, kill me as quick as you can. Lock me up as quick as you can. Ruin my life. That's the real message that's being portrayed. People need to do the history and understand what they're getting involved with before they decide to get involved with it. Because everything in life has rules. It has rules and regulations. Let me enlighten you to something else. Rules, regulations, and laws are only put in place for those who lack the intelligence to govern themselves. So if you don't know how to operate within a certain situation, or you don't know the protocol to dealing with certain situations that come about, they have documented rules and regulations and laws. So you don't have no excuse. You see? So even in the street life, you got the code of the streets and you got the rules of engagement. Even in the military, we have what is called the Geneva Code. So any violation of this, you're not even considered a part of what you claiming to be. Because you're violating the codes, you're violating the laws, you're violating the rules, you're violating the regulations. So that makes you an outlaw, that makes you a rebel. And I don't care how gangster a person portrays themselves to be, their closest friend don't want to have no dealings with a rebel. Because even though the scripture says trust nobody but God, we still have to have certain level of loyalty. See, loyalty trumps everything. And when you have a friend who's unruly and playing by their own rules, when there's a code of the streets and there's rules of engagement, but they doing what they want to do, it be that same friend that you have that will kill you after they done called you their friend. So I want to wake my people up because we're at a point in our lives now where it's time to start living as kings and queens. It's time to start uplifting each other. It's time to build our communities up. And all this acting tough, you know, there's an arena, there's a playing field for that, you know. But when you're dealing with, I can't hang out with my cousin because he's from one neighborhood, I'm from another neighborhood, and they represent this over there and I represent over here. So you separated from your family because you representing this and they representing that, and it all amounts to a bunch of ignorance. The Apostle Paul says in Scripture, come let us reason together. You know what I'm saying? Even if I'm not on what you on, we can still have a conversation. You know, you don't violate me, I won't violate you. But just to say, because you represent that and I represent this, I'm gonna try to take you out, that's a fool's activity. And we're gonna get into that. You know, I've been watching, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I very seldomly watch the news because the news is propagated upon, what is called a need to know basis, and most of the stuff that comes on the news, I don't think I need to know. But anyhow, I watch a lot of YouTube, and as a result of watching YouTube, God allows me to see some of what's on the news. And it also comes to my attention that, people are just doing some ridiculous things, looking for likes and views. YouTube has become it's become some kind of spell on people. And this is nothing to discredit YouTube, because it's a business platform that is designed to help anybody become successful. But we all know that sex sells and violence sells, you know what I'm saying? But there's different kind of ways that you can portray these things, But when you just on there looking for 100,000 views overnight, and you take it amongst yourself to, desecrate somebody's mural who has passed away already, or disrespect somebody's family. I saw one clip where they wanted to get a guy so bad they burned his grandparents' house down. with his grandparents in it. You know, it comes to a point where, you know, you have to wake up. You have to wake up. Violence begets violence. If you're going to be violent, violence is going to come back to you. Nobody is oblivious of violence when they are violent. No one. And we know this is survival of the fittest, and only the strong survive. And God is always the strongest. And we have to know black people and Hispanic people and white people and every other ethnicity and culture that graces the face of this earth that want to be tough by way of violence and street affiliation and gang activity. We got to know that God has an attribute. He has a deity, just like we have a deity. We have a characteristic that make us up. And God, one of the things that make up God is omniscient and omnipresent. So you think you're getting away with something, but you're not. You think nobody knows where you're at, but they do. So it's very, very easy to seek you out and very, very easy to find you. These are things that need to be taken into consideration. God is everywhere at the same time. So it's just like I said this before in a conversation. Words travel faster than the speed of light. This is facts. Words travel faster than the speed of light. There could be an ebonic or a slang in one part of the country, and 2 weeks later, the rest of the world is saying the same thing. Because that word done traveled. It done got around. Somebody on a telephone, somebody text message. What that mean? Now they saying it, they think it's slick. Now everybody's saying it, and people start putting their own definitions and meanings on it. Words travel faster than the speed of light. And when we dealing with people that's on social media, and you know what them sites are, and you glorifying your negativity, and you talking about who you gonna shoot, and I wish what would, just as fast as you're putting that message out there, just as quick as you have put that upload or you have hit record on that device to go live, it's been hundreds of people across the world that is spreading that information. So how many people out of those hundreds will say, oh, I know who that is. I know where they're at right now. As a matter of fact, I'm with them. How much you gonna pay me to give up the location? So this all goes back to the question. Which one will you choose? Life or genocide? And I'm very passionate about this topic, about the cost of blood spill, because we're losing a lot of people for cheap. I mean, it don't cost you nothing to be stupid. We are losing a lot of our youth for a very cheap price. And it has to stop. It has to stop, people. It has to stop. Young people, you have to come out of that cocoon of negativity and move into a more positive atmosphere. You have to reassess, your thinking. You have to become more cognitive. And I can dig it where you're coming from. I understand street life. I understand gang activity. I don't have to get specific on those topics because real gangsters move in silence. But I want to say this. When I was a child, I thought as a child. I acted like a child. But when I became a man, I put away all childish things. So at some point in life, you got to think about your children. You got to think about your parents. You got to think about the little kids in the neighborhood who look up to you and count on you. And they just at a toddler age or adolescent age, and they looking for you to be around when you're 35, 40 years old, so they can gravitate to you and see how you paved the way for them. It's very discouraging for them to hear that you was slain in the streets because of your street activity, your gang affiliation, and even worse, your big mouth. So, I'm not saying this to offend anyone, but I'm giving you the truth, whether you like it or not. And it is the truth that will set you free. Real gangsters move in silence. Now, for the next topic under this heading, this is something that kind of piggybacks on what I just said, or veggie back for all my conscious people who don't eat pork. So, you are your worst ops. That's the term that the young folks is using nowadays. I'm trying to keep you older folks up to date on what's going on out here. So when you hear these things being said in the house, you just not ignoring it. You know, when your nephews and nieces and grandchildren are walking around the house talking about they got an ops, you know, you need to know what that is. You know, and they say stuff like capping. Capping means you're lying, you making stuff up, or you just fronting, you know. So capping, you know. So let's deal with ops. What I need you to know, young people, is you are your worst ops. For those who don't know, an ops is short for opposition or enemy. That's what an ops is. It's your opposition. The ones who are against you and your enemy. What happens when you are your worst ops? There is a quote that has been stated long ago. You are your worst enemy. You are your worst enemy. I mean, you ought to just look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, which way am I going to try to destroy me today? You are your worst enemy. Now, you are your worst enemy. Some might ask, or one might surmise, how can I be an enemy of myself? So I'm glad you asked the question, because I'm going to give you the answer. Because I want everything to be real crystal before we end this podcast today. What makes you your worst enemy? The person that is constantly dwelling on negative things. They just negative, negative, negative. Never positive. Even during a positive situation, they're going to say something negative to discredit the positive.